Welcome, everyone, to the Fantasy Phoenix podcast. Today, we're diving straight into NBL SuperCoach, so let's review round 3. Now, I knew going into the round that we were going to have a bit of an underwhelming performance in round 3, as with trades and some cash storage, trying to build up a little bit of a war chest, we tried to go for cash gen and money making and money saving so that we could be ready to attack this week and next week. So we knew we weren't going to have the best of rounds, but I didn't think it was going to go quite as poorly as it did with 317 points. Disgraceful total. Now, a decent portion of that blame can go to our main trade-in and captain option. He was our buy last week, and I had a lot of confidence in him. He had a low break even, was performing well. Unfortunately, the guy that we traded Tyler Cook out for and slapped the C on, it did not go so well. The Hawks in general did not perform well against the Jack Jumpers. They absolutely destroyed them. 30-point blowout, which realistically probably should have been more. And to top it off, J-Rob couldn't make a shot of his life depended on it against the 36ers. Now, I did watch both games, obviously, as a Hawks fan, and there was probably a couple of opportunities for assists where he may not have been credited them, and there was also, I can't remember which of the two games it was, but he was stung for a turnover that probably wasn't his fault. It was more the passer to him caused the turnover, but it was credited to him. So things like that don't help. I mean, I'm not saying that it would have turned him into a fantastic round, but the little things do add up. When you get 40 as your captain score on a double, I mean, it wasn't as bad as the Cook 10, but still, it could have been much better. In some breaking news, Source has confirmed that he is going to be back this week. So that means Tyler Cook is officially done for the Phoenix. And obviously, if he's in your SuperCoach team, if you haven't already traded him out, you must do that now. Along with Source being back, the Phoenix do lose someone for at least the first game of the round. And unfortunately, it is SuperCoach bargain option Ben Air. I started with him and was planning to move him on at the end of this double with this round in mind. But with him missing at least one of the games or potentially two with this ankle injury, unfortunately, that's going to have to change. But shout out to SuperCoach Matrix, who couldn't have said it any better. How am I supposed to breathe with no air? But Big Sauce is not the only dominant big man that's going to be back this week. JLA is going to play his first minutes of the year against the Illawarra Hawks on Friday night. So if you're a Huck Porty owner, or more specifically, if you had any intentions of captaining Huck Porty this year, probably beware. You might have to look elsewhere, I think. I still think Huck Porty is an option to hold on to, but yeah, we probably can't be slapping the C on him. In some other very relevant news, DJ Vasiljevic has signed for the Adelaide 36ers. Now, this has been in the works for a little while. He's been training with them, but it seems as though it's all official. Paperwork's all good from the Kings and the Wizards, and it looks like he's going to be suiting up Thursday night against the Phoenix. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to be an option straight off the bat, or potentially not for quite a while with Adelaide's poor schedule after this week. But I'm going to say he will affect the guards around him that could have been options. McCarron, Trey Kell, and even some of those that were thinking of bringing in Flowers. It's just someone else that's going to add to that little logjam of guards. We'll say outside players from the 1 to the 3. It's going to make things a little bit trickier for Adelaide's options. Before diving into the buy, sell, keep and avoid, in terms of Adelaide guys who don't really feature in that, the only ones I'd be looking at, I won't be, but if I were, would have to be Humphreys or Wiley. But Humphreys being a centre, you're probably already going to have Huck Porty. I don't think it's worth going one to the other when you could be using a trade to either get some cash or someone else that's on a double in another position. So that basically brings it down to just Jacob Wiley. I don't think he's a bad option by any means, but it's really only a 1 week punt, seeing as Adelaide now don't have another double for, I think it's 6 game weeks, 6 or 7 game weeks. It's a long drought, so it could be worth a 1 week punt, but I'm not too sure. As discussed, with only 3 teams on the double this week, let's have a look at some players to potentially trade in or out in our buy, sell, keep, and avoid segment. So buy are players that I think are good options to trade in if you don't already have them. Sell players I think that are options to trade out if you do own them. Keep players that are being traded out by others, but I think you should consider keeping, and avoid players that are being traded in by others, but I think you should consider avoiding. Our buy for the week is Shea Ili. So I think in Melbourne United, we're looking at 3 guys, but I think Shea Ili is the option. He scored majority of his points in the second half after Delhi went down with that concussion. And United are the only team that have the double this week and back it up next week. So it can still be a good option to bring him in, and even if he's on the bench or potentially still playable, depending on what happens with Delhi next week. Now, it could be a little bit of a raffle amongst Ili, Goulding, and Clark of who to bring in. And I don't think any of them are bad options if you're sold on bringing in a United guard that isn't Luke Travers this week. Ili doesn't rely on his shot dropping, whereas the others do. Now, don't get me wrong, CG43 got pretty hot and can definitely light it up. And they all play against Illawarra on Friday as their first game. So I wouldn't be surprised if they all had great rounds based off that, with Illawarra's inability to defend. But, well, I think that of all of those, Ili would also get the least amount of attention if they're all on the court at the same time. So it does give him more opportunity to facilitate, and he's a pretty decent spot-up shooter too. Sell, alluded to this a bit earlier. Unfortunately, Ben Ayre. Ayre was a decent pick for many, but unfortunately cannot fulfill his main purpose, which was the round 4 double. The Phoenix released that he's going to miss at least the first game with an ankle injury, and even if he does play in the second, I don't know if holding him in the hopes of that is necessarily going to be the best option, especially when he can be moved to someone else to get some better points or cash gen or both. This is the now controversial one. So we're going for the keep. Justin Robinson. Could be controversial. It might also just be wishful thinking on my part. Pains me to say as a Hawks man, but Illawarra are not great. They can't play defense. There's minimal offensive structure. And they also play one of the most restrictive teams in the league this week in Melbourne United. However, I don't think he's the number one trade out priority. Delhi is out for United, as we mentioned earlier, so there is one less shutdown guy on the team. Robinson is also a guy that feeds off the crowd energy, both witnessing him in person at the WEC and also in his own statements for Hawks media. Every play, it's hands up, he's pumping, he's cheering, absolute celebration kind of guy. He gets hyped off the crowd, and the Hawks are back at home. His best performances have been at home. He's obviously only played 3 games at the WEC and 2 away in his NBL career, but I think he's definitely going to bounce back. And surely he can't shoot that poorly again. I know he hasn't had the greatest shooting performance this season, but man, that was disastrous last week, particularly against the 36ers. So I'm backing him in to perform a little bit better. Now, I think he might still drop a little bit of cash. His break-even, I'm pretty sure, is 36 off the top of my head. So even if he gets a 30, which I think is his projection, he still drops a few K, which is not the end of the world. They have the double next week. And for me personally, he's paired well with Will Cummings. So Cummings on the bench last week for J-Rob, and then this week it's going to be switch those two around, and then he can come back onto the court for their double next week. And I think that's then when you can reassess the situation after that. Avoid Jonah Bolden. So about 500 coaches, I think it's 495 to be exact so far, have already traded in Bolden this week. Now, he had a fantastic round, and he's with back-to-back double-doubles. He's only looking to get better and better as the season goes on, which is awesome for him, awesome for Australian basketball. However, the Kings only have 1 double in the next 6 rounds. If you're bringing him in, I mean, he might be a bit of cash gen, but it's a fair chunk of money to be tied up in someone that's only going to play 1 double in 6 weeks, especially when we've got multiple teams with really good schedules coming up, and you don't want to tie up your trades bringing in someone like this. Now, he's probably something we're going to want in the future, but for this point, I think we should all avoid Bolden. Okay, now it's time for our top 3 captain options. And for the first time this week, we have an honourable mention. Luke Travers. With 1 less facilitator out of the lineup and 1 extra big to lob it to, I think Travers is going to be a pretty good option this week, especially with the matchup against the Witches hats that are the Hawks. Now let's get into number 3. Number 3, Gary Brown. Had his best game coming back from injury last week, just shy of the double-double. We know what he can do. We saw it last year, and it finally looks like he's going to have his full squad set up this week, if Ben Ayre plays in that second game, of course. Could he get the double-double? Number 2, Will Cummings. Has already shown his ceiling with 73 points in round 2 and 60 in round 1. He gets his points in a variety of ways. I think that he has a really high ceiling that is going to be very important this week with only 3 teams on the double. As with Brown and our number 1 option, they do play against Adelaide, who give up a lot of points, and then Brisbane as well, who are without Baines. So I watched the Phoenix play the Hawks live, and Cummings, he's everywhere. He's going in for steals, he's setting up assists, he's crashing the glass. Well, when I say crashing, that's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but he's getting those guard rebounds. He makes good plays. He shoots the ball well. I don't think the teams this week are going to have the defensive capabilities to stop him, especially with Gary Brown by his side. One of them's going to go off at least. Hopefully, we pick the right one. Number 1, Mitch Creek. Now, he hasn't hit the heights of his previous season, but I still think he's the safest option for your round 4 captain. He gets his running mate, Alan Williams, back this week, and Gorjak Gak back as well, hopefully a little bit more minutes. I think he can have some more freedom to grab boards and score with them tying up the big men of the opposition. As with the guards, they play against Adelaide, who give up plenty, and Brisbane without Baines. He may have let us down as the number 1 captain option a couple of weeks ago, but this is the week. And in terms of safety as well, majority of the competition are going to be captaining Creek, whether they already owned him and held him or they bring him in. So this is kind of like if you're familiar with FPL, this is kind of like captaining Haaland. You know it's going to be the safest option and it is the lowest risk play. My trades are a little bit undecided at the moment. I kept a war chest to be able to bring in Creek this week. I started with Cummings and he's going to be my captain if I don't trade in Creek. Maybe even if I do trade in Creek, he might still be my captain. Initially, my moves were going to be McDaniel and Valentine out for Creek and Parker Jackson Cartwright. But now that Ben Eyre is out, it could also be him out instead of McDaniel, and we'll have to do the sums to see if we can still go with that combination. It's probably going to be a last-minute call, but hopefully we get some luck this week and we trade in someone that we can rely on for more than 40, as with J-Rob, but we'll see how we go. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening or watching if you're watching this on YouTube. If you've got any questions or feedback, please feel free to hit us up on X. You can find us at fantasyphoenix_. Hopefully, if you start typing it in, we'll pop up, but you might need the underscore. If you're listening to this on Spotify and you prefer a video version, check us out on YouTube. We'll have links to both, links to the YouTube channel at the bottom of the Spotify, and same goes with YouTube if you prefer just to listen. We'll link it to Spotify as well, so you have both options. But I really appreciate the support we've had so far. Obviously, this is our first year doing it. It's a bit of a slower grind. In terms of performance, the next few weeks are going to be very telling, and hopefully that's where we can really make more of a charge. But we'll find out shortly. Good luck with round 4, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next episode.